Okay, thank you. My name is Timo Huhtamäki. I'm in charge of Tori.fi marketplace here in Finland, and I have had this kind of events roughly 50 times this year. So every time I try to understand how I could create value. You have seen quite a lot of things about platformization and marketplaces and sharing economy and so forth. So I'm not going to go through those anymore. But instead, I have some more like controversial issues and something that I really like to claim because I've been involved in this business for 2 years now, and Schibsted, who is the owner of our business, is the big media marketplaces company based in Norway, and they have marketplaces in 22 countries in the world, and they know quite a lot of things about this business. And Schibsted is actually the biggest marketplaces company in the world, and Facebook is the second biggest, and Amazon is number 3. So this is something that people really don't understand, and this is related to the brand architecture of the company, so that we have local brands in every country, and Tori is our Finnish brands. There is something I'd like to claim you before I start and go into the details, is that actually, I think personally that we, at the moment, as we are living in very linear economic model in the world, we have a monopoly of new stuff. All the structures in our society, all the legislations, incentives, and so forth are supporting us to be a part of the linear economy. And not to be not boosting this circular economy models. I know there are some initiatives, and they have been trying to do some incentives, but not like a true incentives to do that. I try to give you some examples during this presentation, and as I know there's only 7 minutes left or something like that, so we can discuss about this after that as well. But let's go to this side. So there was one sentence that actually woke me up, is that the consumers the kind of, was it so that inspiration is driving, or consumers are driving the change? So how did you say that, or something like that at the end of your presentation? And if I think of circular economy, it is at the moment the discussion is very waste oriented, I think. Yes, and the if you think about the world and the consumer durables business, for example in Finland, it is roughly 20 billion euros annually, and only 2% of that goes through the second hand. Only 2%. It's approximately 400 million euros. Think about the world which would have that the proportion of the second hand business would be 20% or 30% or something like that. It is totally possible thing. The endurance of the products and the life cycle is and the designs and everything are supporting this kind of model. So design is not a problem, endurance is not a problem. But what is actually a problem is that we have a huge balance sheet of the stuff in our closets and so forth. So I could say that the balance sheet of the nation in consumer durables, it is growing every year, and that is something that we really cannot measure when we take a look at the bookkeeping of Finland and the gross domestic product and investments and so forth. We don't have any measurements when it comes to the stuff in the people's closets. We only know what is the amount of new stuff, and we have some statistics related to the waste and so forth, but we really don't know how much stuff we have in our closets. And I remember some of the numbers. Try to guess how many items on average every Finnish household has. How many? One household. My home. How many items? Quite close. It's more, 1,900 altogether. That is the fact, and only 600 of them are bought on second hand or third hand or so forth. So it is everything is based on the new stuff. But 1,900, it's quite a lot. But when you take 2 square meters, you can see that there are 200 items or something like that if you calculate. But it's interesting. When I'm referring to the more interesting side of the circular economy, I'm referring to the consumption. Now, I think that people tend to think that consumption is more interesting than waste management. And I think that is something that people really share. Another thing that I'm really sharing, this laser is not, maybe, yeah, you cannot see that, but what is actually important here that we have this retail business, as I said, for example, in consumer durables is 20 million euros in Finland. Then we have this 4% of the circular economy side or the second hand. But then there is a big thing that will change the dynamics of this market in the long term is the so-called circular retail that is invented by me. So it's not official. Don't try to Google it. You can only see one blog or something like that. But what I actually mean that the retailers and brands, they are trying to connect their businesses into the second-hand business. Yesterday I think it was Telia or Telia has announced that they are going to sell second-hand handsets and mobile phones, so forth. So that is one example of that. Take a look at Hennes and Mauritz. They have this Found is the name of their new chain. IKEA has their own circular economy concepts and so forth. You have seen all the brands, Iittala, Finland, Vepsäläinen, Artek have their second-hand stores and so forth. They are struggling with this issue because the traditional retail is in a big crisis due to the platformization and the e-commerce and so forth. So that's something that will grow, and it will also boost the role of the second-hand business. And at the moment, according to the Finnish Association of Trade, Kaupan Liitto, the consumer market of the consumer durables is growing at approximately 2 to 3% pace at the moment, but the second-hand business is growing something close to the 15%. So that means that those are meeting each other, those curves at some point. And at the same time, we understand the big trend in the world that 40% of the global retail will happen in the marketplaces in 2021. That's a big thing. And then, of course, the traditional e-commerce is part of that. So that is increasing. What I actually mean here as well is that, as many economists have been saying, that it will become an organic part, but it has actually been organic part for a long time. What is the kind of dissonance here I'd like to say is that when we compare different countries, is that there's one significant driver behind the C2C business, and that's poverty. Because the less people have money, they have the increasing need to sell their items, and that's kind of dissonance. The more we have money, the less we are interested in doing this, and that's something we have to change in our values. This is actually the same picture, 20 billion euro market and circular retail there in between. This is just one case. As you have seen, we have a big problem in the world that no one is talking about, is the e-commerce and people palauttaa. What is palauttaa? Returning the items, and that's no one is disclosing the numbers, as you have seen. Try to ask. No one is disclosing them, and that's a big problem. And somehow some players have been trying to touch this topic so that they are putting those to the second-hand marketplace, and Vepsäläinen has done that. And I know there are quite many cases who are planning this kind of things as well. What is also important here to understand that in order this kind of thing to function, you must have a big marketplace. We have 2.4 million users, so we are the biggest marketplace in Finland. We have more than 270 million visits every year, so it's a huge, and the liquidity of the items is quite good, so that we have roughly 10 million new consumer advertisements every year, and approximately 30% of them are sold within 2 to 3 days. So that's I would say that liquidity is quite good, and in order this kind of marketplace to function, you must have an inventory and buyers. You have to balance these things, and all of those who are thinking that maybe I could found a marketplace, there is one very important insight behind that, is that when you start this kind of business, the liquidity must be good from day number one. Otherwise, it's not functioning, and typically it requires funding. And I say that in Finland it requires something of 500,000 euros in marketing money, so that you can in a nationwide level balance the supply and demand in the general products. Okay, this website landing case I already described them, and the Tori is here in the middle, kind of like an engine of the circular economy. As of course, all of the players could draw their own businesses in the middle and other businesses on the left and right side. But that's something that we have to understand. What is driving you as a consumer, and that is inspiration. What is driving inspiration is that you are doing some, you are succeeding what you do, and that is why the buying and selling, if it's done easy, then it's boosting this kind of business. I already told about the balance sheet of this nation, but for example, in the furniture business in Finland, in consumer prices, it is approximately 1 billion euros, and in this case, this C2C commerce is roughly 150 million euros, so already 15% of the total market, and that is something that where the maturity of the business in this segment is quite high, and if we could change the world so that in all consumer durables businesses the proportion of the second hand would be 15%, we would have more and more sustainable world. And that is leading us to less transportation, less production, less usage of the raw materials and so forth. And there is one thing that I would like to amplify all of you. We really need political decisions. We really need incentives in the taxation and so forth in order to succeed in this. Like a clear incentives to the retailers and so forth. Okay, I think my time is up.
Yes, perfect. Okay. If you stay here,